You ever see a moment that feels quiet, but it hits you like thunder? That's exactly what happened the day an old man walked onto a shooting range in Pinewood, Texas, and reminded a whole generation what real skill and respect looks like. It was a breezy Wednesday morning, the kind where the clouds hang low but the air feels clean. At Camp Redstone, a small training base out by the edge of town, things were moving like clockwork. New recruits were lining up for their quarterly marksmanship tests. You could hear the chatter, the clinking of metal against gear, boots crunching over gravel. Most of these kids had been out of high school for maybe 2 years. They looked sharp, helmets slightly crooked, rifles freshly clean, that nervous bounce in their steps. Then a dusty, beat-up truck rolled in from the side road. The engine coughed once before going quiet. The door opened slow, like time itself needed a minute to catch up. And out stepped an elderly man in a weathered coat, a ball cap that had clearly seen better days, and a soft limp in his left leg. He didn't carry a military duffel or wear any badges. Just a plain cloth bag slung over his shoulder. Old, faded, like it had stories of its own. A recruit near the back elbowed his buddy. "Who's Grandpa?" he whispered. But someone else knew exactly who he was. Private Marcus Bell, wide-eyed and grinning, ran over from the shooting line. "Grandpa Will," he whispered, trying to keep his voice from cracking. "You made it!" Will Calder gave a small nod and a half smile. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo." Most of the instructors barely looked up. One of them, Sergeant Leon, walked over with a folding chair. "You're welcome to watch, sir. Just stay behind the line. Gets loud up here." Will nodded. Wouldn't dream of getting in the way. But just before sitting down, he unzipped that old canvas bag. Inside, carefully wrapped in cloth, was a long-barreled rifle. Wood grain dark with age, the metal worn but spotless. He ran a hand along it slow, like greeting an old friend. No one noticed. Not yet. Sergeant Leon caught a glimpse and let out a short laugh. "Didn't think anyone still hauled around a Woodstock like that," he joked. "She's a museum piece." Will just smiled. "She's still got some breath in her, if my hands cooperate." Marcus shuffled a bit, clearly torn between pride and nerves. He used to shoot way back. He was really good. Leon raised an eyebrow. "We've got a spare lane, slot 9, if he wants to take a shot or two, for fun." And just like that, it shifted. That one word, fun. Like it was a joke. Will didn't flinch. He just walked toward lane 9, slower than the rest. He adjusted his glasses, squared his shoulders. His left knee wobbled slightly, and one of the younger guys near the back whispered, "Hope they got paramedics on standby." Another muttered, "Barrel's shaken already." But Will, he didn't hear them. Or maybe he just didn't care. He raised the rifle, lined up the shot, took a long, steady breath. Bang! The bullet missed clean, not even close. A few muffled chuckles broke out. Sergeant Leon gave a polite shrug. "All right, folks, let's not burn through too much ammo." But Will's voice interrupted. Calm, solid. "One more." Leon turned back, surprised. "Sir, maybe it's—" Will didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. One more. It was like someone hit mute on the whole field. Even the wind seemed to pause. Marcus stepped forward. "He's got this." Leon glanced at the others, shrugged, and gave a nod. Will breathed deep, but this time, everything changed. He ran his thumb along the stock like he was reading history written in wood grain. He shifted his stance, centered his grip, and then it was like time slowed down. He moved with the stillness of someone who'd done this 1,000 times and who knew this might be his last. Bang! The shot cracked like thunder. And then, nothing. No jokes, no laughter. Just silence. "Did he hit it?" someone mumbled. Leon squinted down the spotting scope. His face went pale. He zoomed in, leaned back, stepped away. No words. One by one, the instructors took a turn. Nobody said a thing, not until a younger soldier raised his binoculars and let out a stunned whisper. "No way." At the far end of the field, a paper silhouette fluttered in the wind, split clean through the center. Dead center, like the bullet had been hand-delivered. Will stepped back, lowered the rifle, and turned to Marcus. "That'll do," he said simply. The other stood frozen. A few recruits looked at each other, unsure whether to clap or just stare. One whispered, "He didn't even brace." "I didn't think he could lift it," another said. "Marcus, he just beamed. He doesn't have to brace. He invented that stance." And then someone asked, quietly, "Wait, what was his name again?" Sergeant Leon cleared his throat. "Will Calder." And suddenly, the silence shifted. This time, it wasn't about awkwardness. This time, it was about respect. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. One of the older officers narrowed his eyes. "Calder? You don't mean Major Will Calder from Echo Ridge?" No one answered, but everyone already knew. A soldier broke into a sprint toward the admin building. Inside, the base's old personnel files, the kind nobody checked anymore, lit up for the first time in years. And there it was, a dusty record, scanned from a yellowing file, showing a younger man beside a perfect bullseye. A record, still standing, 40 years strong. And that was just the beginning. Back at the range, Will was already sitting again, slipping the rifle gently into its canvas sleeve. Not hiding it, just letting it rest. His hands moved slow, like they were handling something sacred. He looked over at Marcus and gave the slightest nod. Not for applause, not for attention, just a quiet, "That's enough." But the atmosphere had completely changed. No one was laughing anymore. Even the cockiest recruits were now sneaking glances at the man who, just minutes ago, they were joking about. Because now they knew. This wasn't just some veteran. This was the Will Calder. The man's shot had never been matched. Until today. In the middle of it all, Captain Nolan, a quiet guy who rarely left his office, came marching down the field, holding a printout like it was made of glass. On it, a black and white photo from 1983. A younger Will, sunburned and grinning slightly, kneeling next to a target split clean in two. He held the paper out to Sergeant Leon without a word. Leon blinked at the date. This was 40 years ago? Nolan nodded. To the week. Behind them, a sleek black SUV rolled into the gravel rot. Government plates, flag decal. Out stepped Colonel Raymond Price, the base commander. His presence alone made the instructor stand straighter. He didn't bark orders, didn't make a speech. He just walked, slowly, all the way down the field, until he stood in front of Will. Will looked up, didn't stand, didn't salute, just looked him in the eye. Price took off his cap. "Sir," he said quietly. "Inside the range office, there's a plaque. Been hanging there for 40 years. Your name's on it." Will didn't move. "Didn't come here for a plaque." "I know," Price replied. "But that shot today, that wasn't luck. That was legacy." Around them, the recruits stood silent, some with their rifles still slung across their backs. Others just stood there, listening, watching, absorbing the weight of the moment. Marcus, standing nearby, looked at his grandfather with something different in his eyes now. Not just pride, not just love, but awe. That feeling when you realize the person who tucked you in at night once shaped history. Will placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I trained a lot of young soldiers in my time. Figured it was time I came to watch one of mine." Later that afternoon, as the sun started dipping behind the tree line, the story had already spread like wildfire. Inside the lounge, a few younger soldiers sat with wide eyes, whispering about the old man who nailed the bullseye. Others weren't whispering anymore. They were Googling, pulling up articles, trying to piece together the story no one had told them. Meanwhile, inside the office, Marcus sat beside his grandfather. Will was nursing a cup of black coffee, hands steady now. "You never told me," Marcus said, gently resting the rifle across his lap. Will didn't answer right away. He just stared out the window, watching the wind roll across the field. "There wasn't much to tell," he finally said. "That's not true." Marcus reached into Will's old canvas bag. Beneath the cleaning cloths and the earplugs, there was a leather folder, worn, soft from years of use. Inside, newspaper clippings, a faded certificate, and a photo. It showed a younger Will Calder beside two other soldiers, one a young officer, the other in a wheelchair, grinning with a half salute. The headline read, "Sniper pulls 3 from enemy fire, declines medal." "I found this online years ago," Marcus admitted. "Didn't know it was you." Will leaned forward, brushing his thumb across the corner of the photo. Those boys didn't make it home. Only reason that story ever got written was because Parker, the lieutenant, lived long enough to tell it. Marcus looked at his grandfather, really looked this time. Why'd you stop shooting? The question hung in the air, long, heavy. Will finally answered, voice barely above a whisper. Because after that day, it stopped feeling like a skill, started feeling like a burden. He looked down at his hands. "So I taught others, stayed behind the line, let the young ones rise." Marcus didn't push. He just nodded, the kind of nod that says, "I hear you, I see you, I won't forget." Outside the building, a line had started to form. Not for target practice, not for drills, just a quiet line of recruits. They weren't asking for stories, they didn't want autographs. They just came up, one by one, and said, "Thank you, sir." Will didn't say much back. He didn't have to. A nod, a handshake. That was enough. He never told them about the ambush, or the late-night missions, or the medals that never arrived. He just sat there with that calm, grounded presence, the kind that doesn't shout, "Look at me," but whispers, "I was here." The next morning, the range was quiet. No drills, no instructors barking orders, just wind moving gently through the pines. Will showed up anyway. Not with his rifle, not with a speech, just a thermos of coffee and his cap tucked under one arm. Downrange, Marcus stood waiting. Behind him, the same 4 recruits who had giggled 2 days ago were now holding fresh targets. A little stiff, a little quiet. Not scared, just focused. Because they didn't want to disappoint Private Bell. "Are these boys any good?" Will called out, squinting in the morning light. Marcus smiled. "Better than they were. Still got room to grow." Will nodded. "Good. Keep 'em steady." He never fired a shot that morning, just watched. And every so often, Marcus would glance back, just to check if he was still watching. And Will always was. By midday, drills had picked back up, and the field was alive again, but something had changed. You could feel it in the way the instructors paused before giving orders, and how the recruits handled their rifles with just a little more care. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper, a kind of reverence. Later that afternoon, Sergeant Leon walked over to Will as the recruits were packing up. "I owe you an apology," he said, voice low, almost unsure. "When I saw you out here, I figured you were just someone tagging along. Didn't know I was standing in front of the man who wrote half the marksmanship manual we still use." Will didn't blink. He just extended his hand. "We all start somewhere, Sergeant. What matters is how we finish." Leon shook his hand with both of his. "Your shot, the second one, we're framing the target, putting it in the office next to the old plaque." Will raised an eyebrow. "Still got that plaque, huh?" Leon smiled. "We do now." Will didn't linger. He didn't pose for a photo or ask for a ceremony. He just nodded once, then turned back toward the dirt road where his old truck waited. As he reached the tailgate, Marcus jogged up beside him. "They're going to talk about you now," Marcus said, almost breathless. "The others, the whole base, you'll be remembered." Will sipped from his thermos, then looked out across the quiet field. "I'm not worried about being remembered," he said. "I'm just glad someone else knows the story now." He pulled his cap over his head, same old cap, same gentle curve in the brim, and climbed into the truck. Marcus didn't move right away. He just stood there, watching his grandfather drive off into the dust, engine humming soft and steady like the story itself. Because sometimes legacies don't need fanfare. Sometimes they're passed down in silence, in how you walk, how you hold your ground, how you aim, and how you let go. 3 days later, a new frame appeared on the wall inside the Camp Redstone office. It hung beside a dusty plaque that had gone unread for years. Inside the new frame, a paper target, still split, still clean. The bullseye so perfectly pierced it looked unreal. Beneath it, a small brass plate read, "Will Calder, Echo Ridge, 1983. Returned 2023. Still precise, still humble." Most who passed it didn't even notice it at first, just another relic on the wall. But the ones who knew, they paused. Some smiled, some just stared. In the corner of the room, an older Marine leaned in close, whispered like it was sacred. He missed once. Then stood back and said nothing else. Because what came next didn't need to be said. That Sunday morning, Marcus found his grandfather sitting alone under the old flagpole at the edge of the field. The bench creaked a little beneath him. Beside him, his cane rested quietly, untouched. In his hands, nothing but a folded napkin and a fresh cup of black coffee. "You come to fire again?" Marcus asked, walking up. "Fire?" Will repeated, shaking his head. "Nah, just came to hear it." "To hear what?" Will tilted his chin toward the range. The faint pop of distant gunfire echoed across the trees, followed by the murmur of young voices calling out distances and corrections. The sound of it carrying on. Marcus sat beside him. They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. Because some stories don't need telling twice. Some legacies don't need speeches or statues. All they need is a field, a target, and someone watching close enough to remember. That second shot, it didn't just prove a man's aim. It proved his soul, his discipline, his reason for staying quiet all these years. And to every young soldier who lined up at that range in the days that followed, they didn't just see a framed target or a dusty plaque. They saw a standard, a reminder that the loudest echoes come from the quietest men. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow Soul Story for more.